Well, Gino, thank you for taking the time. How's the day going aside from, talking about yourself and answering a lot of questions you've already
Mm,
answered for?
it's okay. It's just part of the day. I'm used to it. Been doing it since I was a kid.
That is very much correct. And this space that I'm seeing you in right
Yeah.
now, there's a keyboard to your right,
Mhm.
there's guitars behind you. I see some percussion. I see
Yep.
a grand piano of sorts. Is this a living room? Is this a rehearsal
No, this is
space?
my studio.
Wow, that's
This is my
fantastic.
man cave.
So, did you record any of the life I got in this great space?
Yes, the whole thing was done here.
Wow. Okay. So, how long has the record been done for?
Well, I had it in, I think it was July, August. And, Sony usually takes 6 months to get their act together to put it out. So, um, yeah, but August.
Wow. Okay. So, there's a strategy behind the whole thing. You knew all along that Sony was going to be the label for it?
Yes, because we had, spoken to them months before and they were very interested. And it was gonna come out on SRG Universal first, and then we decided upon Sony later. Just they seemed to be really enthused and we figured why not?
These days, you see a lot of artists do territory splits where it's like, this is the label for Japan and this is the
Yeah.
label for Canada, etc. Is it Sony worldwide on this new one?
I believe so. It is. It's also uh, it's a different record, market, today. I understand that, and it was the same way. I mean, even in the 80s and 90s, there were people were in various labels, in various territories. South America usually had one label. Maybe there was a boutique label, in one country in Europe or something like that. Um, but of course, it's even more specific today because people don't expect to sell the same amount of records that they sold, 30 years ago or 40 years ago. But they're still an integral part, of an artist's career
Sure.
and an
And
artist's psyche
yeah. Now, if I've done my research correctly, you're based in Portland these days.
outside of
What
Portland.
what made you move to Oregon? Because nowadays it's considered a really, really cool state. A lot of the top corporations are based there. A lot of artists are based there. But from what I recall, Portland was kind of a no man's land still as of the mid 90s.
Well, at the time, my wife Patricia lived in Portland when she was in her late teens, and I was really antsy to get out of LA, and so we were just going to make a choice. We were going to go to Northern California or Southern Oregon or Northern Oregon, maybe Washington. And her mother was living here in Portland, and we stopped over, and I couldn't help notice all the great musicians that were here. And at that time, in the early '90s, was a lot of good clubs, jazz clubs in particular. So it just one thing led to the other, and we ended up buying a house here. And you get settled, and once your kids go to school, and then you kind of really set roots.
In terms of Portland musicians, I first think of the Dandy Warhols, and then I also know that Paul Gilbert from Mr. Big is there. Who are some of the musicians that you knew of as being Portland
Well,
people when you first
I
moved there?
mean, there were some of the popular ones, but my concentration, it was right before I did the album called Yonder Tree, was really the best jazz musicians, young jazz musicians that I could find, who had a good, strong notion of contemporary music, modern music, electronic music, fusion, but a really good basis, a basic understanding, for jazz. And that's how the Yonder Tree album was born. And then, of course, my group now, I mean, they're all from Portland, but not a lot of them originally not. A couple are from LA and then moved to Portland, 20, 30 years ago, almost same time as I did. But they are all from Portland.
So Portland has always had a good jazz scene, and we ignorant people just didn't know it. That's what I'm hearing.
Well, it did. I mean, especially in the early '90s, a lot of musicians from New York came out to Portland trying to find work here, and some of them went back. I mean, it still is a bit of a challenge, to make a living as a jazz musician. Maybe only half, maybe less than half can make a living and have to
Right.
have day gigs. But just to get on that stage and play music you love, I guess you'll do whatever you can.
In terms of your career, we've kind of seen you go in and out of jazz, in and out of pop. So you always kind of keep us guessing. So one thing I don't know that I can't easily figure out is for you, were the hits the same everywhere in the world, or are there particular albums that did better in Europe?
Well, Black Cars did really well in Europe. It was a gold album in many countries, and it was a platinum album in Canada, and South America was a very big album. Hurts to Be in Love off that record was, I think, the biggest record, one of the biggest worldwide records of 1986, and not in the United States. So, I mean,
Right.
there's a few songs that really, I think Wild Horses was. We had some problems with the record company here, but it was a top 10 song in 20 countries. So I've been fortunate, to have a career worldwide. I mean, we're just now going to get ready to do 4 South American concerts. So,
Mm.
it's kind of nice to be able to go everywhere in the world.
Are you allowed to say where in South America? I'm very curious about that.
Yeah, we're negotiating right now for Argentina, Brazil, and Chile.
So the wife and I, not that you asked, went to Chile on vacation back in the spring, and we caught a couple of concerts because wherever I am, I like to see, okay, who's playing and all that.
Hmm.
And seeing Mark Farner live from Grand Funk Railroad, it
Yeah.
was very interesting to see the hits were not the same. So, for example, We're an American Band got a lukewarm response in
Huh.
Chile, and then solo career stuff got the big cheers.
Interesting.
So
Yeah.
in your case, I think that that's what's to be expected in South America, that the more obscure, the
Well,
more
there's
likely is a top
the
10 hit.
Yeah, I mean, there are the ones that became worldwide hits. I mean, Stop, People Gotta Move, and Living Inside Myself, are known everywhere in the world. And there are Wild Horses and Black Cars and Brother to Brother and a few others are Hurts to Be in Love are known in various countries. I mean, it's a little bit. I mean, they know them, but I mean, there are their favorites. I mean, I remember playing Brazil once, and a tune off. I think Big Dreamers Never Sleep was very big there. So I think Persona non grata or something like that. So you never know, really. It's a big world.
And who's in your band these days?
Well, the guys I tour with for the last 15 years, I mean, Jay Coder and Reinhard Meltz and Damien Erskine, Patrick Lamb, and now David Goldblatt on keyboards. And Nick Moon does all the technical stuff. My brother, of course, does the front house. And
Hmm.
we have a horn section that we take with us too.
Wow. Is it the same band no matter where you're
Yes,
playing?
yes.
That is very rare because you'll see, for example, I don't know why I think of Toto. They'll take the horn section to this territory, but not that territory. They'll take the backup singers to this territory, or a Lukather will go, I'm not singing lead on this tour. But a Gino tour is a Gino tour, I'm hearing.
Yeah, I mean it's maybe 95, 99%. I mean there may be one person we hire locally, to sub or something like that, but it's usually really the same guys.
That's fantastic. So, are we going to hear a lot of The Life I Got on this upcoming run?
At least 2 songs from it. As the song, I mean the album is coming out. I like to kind of feed it to the audience slowly. Probably by 6 months from now, we'll be doing 3 songs, and maybe next year, maybe 3 or 4 songs, depending upon if people really like the album or not.
Hmm. I know it was not an easy album for you to
No.
make, and it's the first album in 5 or so years. Are you the kind of artist that's already thinking about the next album?
Well, um, I right now I'm working on a 7 book series. And so
Oh.
I've written 7 short stories that will actually be graphic novels. And they're part of a whole series. And I mean, they're longer than short stories. I mean, they're 120 pages each. So they're almost maybe a novella, you would call it.
Hmm.
And I'm going to write music for them. So this is a whole different thing.
Yes.
The first one that's going to come out is called The Falconer, and I'm going to on the audio CD, there'll be 4 to 5 songs plus all the soundscape. But that's what I really want to do right now. Instead of just doing another record, which would be fine too. It's going to be specifically designed for the stories.
Was there a particular artist that hipped you to the idea that you could do a graphic novel with a soundtrack?
I don't know of any who's done it at this point. These stories are not just lighthearted stories or stories that come from a whim of any
Hmm.
kind. There are stories that I've been writing for the last 20 years, and I finally finished them. And some of them are verse novels or a combination of graphic, prose, and verse novels. But they're original stories that were really inspired by true stories. And I have songs for each story that I really want to record. And also thinking about who's going to be the narrator and who are the characters. It's almost like you have to think of it as being a director for a movie.
When I say, were there any artists that inspired you? This is going to be a very random one to you, but David Lee Roth made a animated graphic novel that had a soundtrack that he just put up, didn't promote, didn't do any interviews to say, hey, it's out. It just randomly appeared and people went, what is this? So I didn't know if you were going to say, well, as a Van Halen aficionado, I follow David Lee Roth and that's what happened. I'm
But what
guessing
year
not.
was that?
20, I know he made it about 10 years ago, but it came out about 2 or 3 years ago. Like
Now,
it sat on the
what is
shelf.
the? I'm curious. What did he write about? What's the story about?
It's some kind of hmm. Okay. Uh, do you know much about Norm Macdonald?
Yeah, a little bit. I
Oh,
mean, the comedian, right?
yes. Norm Macdonald, when he was doing his stand-up, some of it was the truth and some of it was lies, and you don't know what was what. In the
Well, his
case of
dead. Yeah, he never gave it away with his deadpan delivery.
exactly. So with David Lee Roth, he's telling some kind of futuristic story, and you're going, I think some of this might be true and some of this may be lies right here. So he's narrating this thing. It's up at therothproject.com, or it's called The
I
Roth
mean,
Project.
every fictional novel is a lie. It's just a question of how believable the lie is, and does the lie mean something to you? And there may be truth behind the lie. I mean, the lie may be that it never really happened that way, but it could have happened that way. I think anything that's plausible transcends the kingdom of lies. It goes into the kingdom of possibilities.
Well said. So it sounds like with this kind of a project that you get to be even deeper than you would with just a studio album.
Oh, definitely, definitely. The characters are very profound and they're based on my a lot on my experience, and then of course I take liberties with my experience. But
Hmm.
there's a core to all the stories that is something I know very, very, very well.
So follow up to all that. Sometimes when an artist has a very ambitious project that the core fan base may not get,
Mhm.
they do an alias of who released it. Would this come out as Gino Vannelli?
I have no reason not to. I mean, I have a very, very open, forgiving fan base, that really expect different things from me. So it would be a good bedrock, for the to release the record. I mean the stories. I'm also speaking to a major publisher and see what they want to do, how they want to promote it, and how they see it. A lot of artists put out their own, and there might be an advantage of being with a major publisher. If I decide that I
Mhm.
want to do a book tour, or things like that, they could help set up all those things.
Well said. So usually I ask artists, when you're not busy touring or recording, what do you do with your time? But as a person who has a 7-part series in the works, beyond a new record, beyond the upcoming South American dates and all that,
Oh,
it
20 days in
sounds
the United
like
States too.
it just doesn't sound like you like downtime very much.
Well, I do, and I mean, but downtime for me means something different than it does for other people. My downtime is not being on stage, and my downtime is reading, writing, maybe a couple of hours, and going kind of just hanging with my Aussies, my Australian shepherds, And then, oh,
Mhm.
an idea comes to me, and I go back to the computer and I work for another 2 hours. That's kind of like downtime for me because it's when it's not downtime, I'm flying and I'm, checking into a hotel, getting ready to do a concert the next day or that night. And that's not downtime. That's like pressure time. You know,
Mm.
be on your best behavior. But downtime for me is just creating. And now recording an album is not exactly downtime, but I find writing the stories, although it can be a little taxing. I find it more like just roaming the landscape in my imagination, and
Hmm.
be quite pleasant.
So it sounds like you're one of those blessed people who figured out how to turn a hobby into a career and livelihood. So you're not giving up anytime soon as a
Well,
result
we'll
of figuring.
see. We'll see. But no, for now, I mean, I do like touring, so we're going to do about 20 dates this year. And we're trying to negotiate something I really want to do with the Quebec Philharmonic
Mm.
Orchestra, 60-piece orchestra up in Canada. Hopefully it'll work out. I think they lost their funding, but I think they may have found it again. So I'd love to do those 5 dates with them because I did a concert with them last year, and it just was. It means a lot to me to play in front of an orchestra because I've written a lot of the songs that I've written orchestral arrangements to them, and it's really fun to do that live too.
So that only further adds to the you don't know what's going to come next from Gino Vannelli. So
Yeah, I
there you
mean, I
go.
never know myself in a sense, because I mean, you have to keep interested. I've been doing this since I've been 17 or 18 years old, and I got
Mhm.
signed to A&M when I was 20 years old.
Mhm.
So, you can't be doing the same thing or else you really turn into an automaton. When I
Well
see some of
said.
my fellow artists, I mean, singing the same songs in the same way, only 60 years later, it feels sad, and it feels like, don't you get
Mhm.
bored? Don't you want to do something else?
Well said. Well, I got one more question for you, and then you're free for me. You ready?
Okay.
Okay. So most people, whatever they do for a living, it starts off like you're a kid in a candy store and you get as much of it as you can, and then you burn out and you do the exact opposite. And then if you're lucky, you kind of come back to it. So you as a world touring performer, what's the last concert that you went to for fun that you chose to be at?
I mean, another artist, is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Oh, I got invited to various concerts over the last few years. I mean, people from various bands, whether it be Sting's band or Bruce Springsteen's band or Janet Jackson's band. I know people in all the bands, and they always say, "Come see, come check out the show." So Stevie Nicks just did a show a little while ago, and Carlos Rios invited me. He played on the Brother to Brother record, so he said, "Come see the show." And so I'm pretty much always invited to the local shows here when artists come through.
Improvised follow-up question to that. So being based in New York, guest list is always really, really tight.
Yeah.
But being in Oregon, does that mean that guest list is really open? So it's not hard to get comp tickets at those shows?
I don't know. I'm not sure about that. All I know is that if you know someone in the band, they always get a couple of comp tickets, and a lot of the musicians know that I live here, and I'm fortunate enough for them to consider me.
Good answer. Well, Gino, thank you for the decades of great art and looking
Thank
forward
you.
to whatever is to come, whether it is a 7-part graphic novel, a symphonic adaptation with that orchestra, another record, etc. Thank you for being you.
Thank you.
Paltrocast.